unorthodox situation at home, you'll be able to understand, what I'm going to tell, first part of my lecture. So I told you that something about my 7 head, right? And I pray God and I got, something as a result, the belief, right? As a result, that I had to offer, this, and I did it. A complete satisfaction, that I developed because, yes, I am proved in such a way, that I'm able to do it. Irrespective, of people, having a culture now, of developing, a bird, here and half-cut or semi-cut or semi-shaven, heads, that children are appearing nowadays. Those are all, borrowed or developed or thrust or imitated or simply, that you bought it. You bought it, through media. You bought it actually, through your visits, abroad, through your visits, to cosmopolitan cities. As a result, that you are compelled to. It so happened, that without, bothering anything about the past, you developed, that. Even children, young children, I'm talking about, that while they're becoming, ready to become, a bridegroom, there in that situation, that they appear with a small bird and trimmed bird, right, pruned bird, right. Now it has become a culture, right. Those days, elderly people, that they used to advise, why don't you just remove all those things, in your face, like. But nowadays, that they keep quiet, not because, that they lost their, faith in it, but because, they don't want to interfere in the younger generation's, faith. The culture, that we have now is something, that a combination of so many. I used all terms, right earlier, and I don't want to repeat again. So this is what actually, the discussion. Actually, it is giving, a meaning, okay. A sign, that gives a meaning. The sign, which I am having gives a meaning. And this meaning, the culling out of this meaning, is learning in cultural studies. So that's why, that I title my lecture, as the role of culture studies in contemporary academics. So contemporary academics mainly focuses on interdisciplinary studies. It is not reading a novel, for story sake, no. Reading a novel for others' sake, right? Others in plural form. What others, available there. You'll be able to, bring out, to the social situation. You are reading a novel, the idea of, getting some other meaning. It is not actually, the meaning of the artist. The artifact, is giving a double meaning, triple meaning, like. I take, bit from New Education Policy, NEP. So the New Education Policy framed by the Ministry of Education in India also favors, multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary studies. Children, that they should not know the content, the original content, the authorial voice alone. Okay, I'm using, the authorial voice. It is not, the purpose. It is not the purpose. You as children, that you as students, should be able to understand beyond the authorial voice, right? In other words, there is a remarkable shift in the way academics is being approached and conceived, globally now. So you have in postmodern novel, you have physics, chemistry, ecology, religion, politics, environment, topology, topography, politics, I told it, that is, lifestyles, food habits, what not, right? What not? That the writers, that the artists also, know the tactics of, writing. I don't say that, in Arcane you don't find, anything. No, it is not so. Even in Arcane, right, environment, is there. Pollution, is discussed. Narrated. Every novel, becomes, a postmodern novel. But the recent postmodern novel is, different. The recent postmodern novel, and unless, you have statistical devices in your mind or mathematical calculations in your mind, you may not be able to understand, what is this. Even a small word, needs, a definition from an important source. Such is, the situation now, right? And you cannot simply read a novel, by getting it. Other day, people used to buy, the novels like, yes, getting into that point, right? James Hadley Chase or Sidney Selton or Don Brown or people, there are anti-number of people, right? They coming under, popular writers, popular fiction, or you are getting into popular culture, right? It is actually, a shift, a change of attitude of the readers, as a result, the change of attitude of the writers. They incorporate, sometimes deliberately. It is voluntary, right? It is not coming, casual. It's not coming casual. It is deliberate sometimes. All those, diasporic writers, they undertake, a trip to Middle East or US. They observe, they document, they narrate. So the readers also, try to understand, the shift or the transformation, right? Or you also, try to travel, with the writer. You experience, the domains presented, narrated, there in the writings. This is when you understand, that you are yes, in a different situation. You try to observe, things, and you try to adapt, things. And you forget, one thing, right? You read decolonizing, the mind, but you adapt, things. I say, the African writers, most of the African writers, right? They favor native identity. Okay. Native identity, that is the true identity. They want to retain, right? They want to retain their own language, their own tongue, in order to have, the culture. So with the language, a culture, is kept alive. So interdisciplinary studies, widens, the horizons of knowledge and academic productivity. It's true. The studies, interdisciplinary studies, it widens. But at the same time, that we should think that we are holding, something already. Of course, knowledge is, important. Knowledge is important. Acquiring, knowledge is very, very important. And as a result, that you can also say that academic productivity, is possible, from your side. I used the word, tradition, earlier. And now, that I'm using, academics. Right. You forget about, tradition, right? Tradition. You are visiting, a temple. You are visiting a temple. How you are going there? And how, that your way of, praying, way of murmuring, the slokas, there inside. What about your dress code, inside? These are all, something, reflecting, our culture. Right. Getting into a temple, right? Those days, I'm sorry, that without going back, I may not be able to justify, culture studies. So I'll have to bring, the known to understand, that what we are going to understand, in next 30 or 40 minutes, this culture studies. Earlier, academics was considered as a scheme, Academics was considered as a scheme consisting of a group of various disciplines with precise definitions and limitations. Earlier, academics was considered, as a scheme consisting of a group of various disciplines with precise definitions and limitations. Now, what actually, you are having, that in your syllabus, that you come across media studies, popular fiction. We weren't allowed to take Sidney Sultan or James Harley Chase, for research. We weren't allowed. No due recognition, was given to such contents, earlier. I told you, 3 decades back. But now, popular fiction, is there part of our syllabus. Media is part of our syllabus because your focus is, on that, right? And today, this pandemic, has further, made us, to change. During 2017, 18, or when mobile phones, were actually introduced. After understanding, that people are actually using more of mobile phones, technology has, made so many changes. Nowadays, that you are having Androids, in your hands. Even this particular session, that you are all attending, making use of Android phones. At home, you are sitting, and the classroom situation, changed. No classroom, is there, right now. That is actually, removed, time being, right? Maybe a year gone, right? Exactly. Last year, COVID, started this time, exactly 10 days now. And again, the second visit, is already there. It is rising. Pandemic, is still there. It has altered, it has widened, yes, both. It has altered, we people, to change the domain of learning. We used to discuss, there in classrooms. absence of a teacher. Our friends, sit together and maybe, we share, everything in the canteen. Maybe, we discuss, the unsolved or delicate problems, on roads, discussing, walking. Those things, gone now. So you are all at home and you are all discussing, things. That's all. Yourself. Maybe a great opportunity, that we are given to self-study, things. And UGC is recommending nowadays, part of the syllabus, that should be introduced as self-study. So, in the novel section, that earlier we had two novels, and now one more is introduced. That is for self-study, and short stories 3 or 4. Now 6, 2 for self-study. See that the pandemic has altered and given chances to upgrade. That is there. We find time, yes. The traveling time to college. To Vaishnav College, from different parts of, Chennai. At least, 1.5 hours, 1 hour, half an hour. And all those things, all those hours, that are now utilized to learn. So every discipline had distinctive tools and structured methodologies to examine and analyze the limited area under its purview. Knowledge is simple, Earlier knowledge is simple, but now knowledge is complicated. How many theoreticians, that we take, to analyze, to interpret, a text? Shashi Deshpande as a feminist, Shashi Deshpande as a not non-feminist. Shashi Deshpande as a naturalist, as a realist. Shashi Deshpande as a good narrator. So the multiple ways, that you apply on a single author and single way of writing, you apply, a tool, right? A distinctive tool, right? And a structured, methodology to examine and analyze. Now, I use the word, definitions and limitations, right? So, the limitations of disciplinary-based academics initiated the development of interdisciplinary studies. So, there are some limitations, there in the text, right? Now, you are looking for, a support, from interdisciplinary contributions. So that is reserved for history. That is reserved for logistics. That is reserved for management. You know that you'll have to keep ready, at least 3 or 4 subjects in your hand to interpret a text, a literary text. Now, how come that it is possible with every student, right? No worry, because every student is made known various subject contents. At least the base. Earlier psychology was something the basic. Basic psychology is enough to understand a text carrying something, alienation as the theme, or exile as a theme, or existentialism as a theme. Basic psychology enough. Basic sociology, history is something different, because we have been learning history right from standard 2 or 3 or 6th standard. Yes. No, history, becomes very familiar, sometimes. Very familiar. Very familiar. So, the limitations of disciplinary-based academics initiated the development of interdisciplinary studies. So, this change in perspective is evident in the broad areas of science and humanities. So, if you were a student, in HSC, having chosen, first group or second group, we had, a physics teacher, we had a chemistry teacher, we had a mathematics teacher. Yes. And the departments, were purely, physics. But nowadays, things are, different. Physics department, is divided based on, the specialization, available there in the department, the staff. The divide, is something, more. You have optics, you have physics, raw physics, nanotechnology, biotechnology, medical biotechnology, bioinformatics. So there are so many divides, right? There are so many specializations as a result, so many qubits, there in the physics department. Yes. And getting into universities, right, you can understand, the system of functioning and what is important, the structured, methodologies, are available. So earlier, it was an area, but now we are treating, that area, as a broader one, right? Broad areas, of science and humanities. Now, I told you something about, the SIT. And the SIT, the change of perception of people, learning, understanding, interpreting texts by way of, reflection, right? Reflection, is a good term, right? What do you get, instinct? What do you get, after experiencing, the same again and again? Chitravanaji Divagara's, cloths, right? A beautiful story about a girl and her shift of domain after marriage, and her shift of knowledge, her shift of dress code, her shift of food habits, her shift of lifestyles. I'm using, plural. And one more, her shift of communication by way of learning, a new language. So this is what, that the change, right? Change actually in metamorphosis, that is. So need-based. Necessity, compels her, to learn new arts. Okay. So earlier, she was very traditional, orthodox situation and group living. Yes. But after marriage, she was shifted to US. See, the culture, she had earlier and the culture, that she is now having. Two important situations, right? There in an individual's life. Likewise, from a village, that you are getting into a cosmopolitan situation, right? In villages, that you don't have, what is it called, a mall. But in a grown-up city, in a developed situation, in a cosmopolitan situation, you have malls. Where the lounge is more, the lawn is more, the corridors are more, and you do have, small situations, right? Cost is more, sophisticated, air-conditioned, right? Once you get in, that you feel, that there is, yes, these are all, very much required. As a result, that you change. You accept, the sit. You accept, the sit. So, one of the major shift, that happened in the field of humanities in relation to interdisciplinary studies is the emergence of cultural studies. So when you become interdisciplinary in nature, right, you feel, the significance of, cultural studies. Now, what is this? A very simple definition, is it is an interdisciplinary mode of study that problematizes, the hegemonic relationships, in the social life. Always there, right? Always there. There are elites, at one side, and the poor, on the other side. You cannot make a link between, these two. Is there a possibility of merging, these two communities? No. No. Yesterday or day before yesterday, there was, a cricket match, Sachin team and other team, right? See that? Where are we now? Where are we now? Sachin team and other team, right? And you have IPL, right? One simple question, that you can ask. What about traditional games, right? What about native games? Those are all gone, right? They are trying to make it, international. They are trying to make it, national level, strong, kabaddi concept, again. They want to give, life to it again. But every time, that they are coming, that other side, when a cricket match is, lively telecasted, live telecast, is there. You all sit, right? In front of TV, that earlier we used to spend time, but now you come and then watch, the game, the score for a while, and then you go to other field. You watch closely, the FB or other social medias, right? And again, you come to cricket. If it is a fall of a wicket or a huge hit, like. You know cricket and you know all details, sharing, things, with friends, WhatsApp, and other things, that. Not that, that I'm blaming things. I'm blaming, children. No, it's not so, right? But the relevance of getting into what is it called, culture studies, right? Now, what is this hegemonic relationships, in the social life? Yes, I told you, something about the elite and the poor. Suppose you are all given, a second chance. Why I am using, second chance? There is a meaning in it. Most of us had our early life, in a different situation, in a different, I mean it, within double quotes, within quotes. We weren't introduced, auto rickshaws. We weren't, we weren't introduced buses, school buses. We weren't used to shoes. We weren't used to water bottles. We weren't used to colorful bags. All we weren't negative, right? All are now missing now. What we have now? What we have now? Any one of you, right? Any one of you. All those, we weren't introduced, right? All those things, most of the things, I told. But we are all introduced now to a mobile phone. In a backpack, what do you have, right? A bit of snacks, a towel, and if you're a girl child, that you are having few cosmetics. In mobile, that in your hand, Android. That's all. Because everything, is there. Right? Everything is there. I use the word, snacks, there in your bag, right? And that is not prepared by mom. That is bought and stored, by mom and is now given to you as a snack. And you order, from your place. So this is something, that a major shift. And how come, that it is a possible and feasible relationship, in this situation? So it problematizes. Within relationships, that you have issues. So cultural studies, is a branch of literary studies. And this is a major misconception, that prevails among the students of literature. Right. So a misconception, is cultural studies is a branch of literary studies. So this cultural studies has high impact on various disciplines like sociology, folklorists, gender studies, film studies. See that there was a research, conducted on 6 of the popular songs, right, there in America. An Indian student, has taken, and that too, right from down south, has taken, a research on 6 of the popular songs, right, just like Bonium and other Abba and other things, right, recent songs. And the relevance, in social situation, relevance of songs in social, relevance of music in social situation, living situation. So I was given, a chance to evaluate, the thesis. I asked, one question. What actually, is your contribution to the society? Just because of taking, this research, what it has done to the society, how relevant, this is to your social situation. No, sir, these songs are very interesting, fine. What relevance? What actually, additional impact, it will create, the people? Sorry, I don't want to give, the full answer. Now you can guess, right, where actually we are. So, you know sociology, you know folklores. You are also, about to learn, something about gender studies, film studies. Yes. Very relevant, film studies, right. Where actually, this film show. Earlier also, we had films. And now, that film studies, is part of our syllabus content. Where students are allowed to see, the films like Parasakti. Right. Even relevant, today in the politics. We are actually in serious politics, for the past 10 days and another 10 days, like. So literature is just one among such disciplines, right? Just one among, such disciplines. It includes, right? Literature includes, all these, yes, subjects. gender studies, that is getting, very, very popular. Because, our own writers, that they are making it, learning it, in a reliable way. Datta and his contribution is, abundant in this. So while you are introduced to cultural studies, right, I'm concentrating, on two areas. One is introducing cultural studies as a mode of analysis. And number two is, critically examining cultural studies as a topic in traditional English literature classrooms. The second component, that should be, seriously dealt. So critically examining cultural studies as a topic in traditional English literature classrooms. Is it possible, right, Naita, with teaching, Naita the Scorpion? The peasants introduced, there in the poem, where they bring lanterns, they register their voices, right? Telling, so many things about the past, about the present, about the future. They tell all those things. The scorpion bite, simply removes all hardships, in your life hereafter. So you are undergoing, what is it called, pain in this life. The next life will be, very fruitful. They say, right, they said. But mother said, a different story. Where comes, this culture studies? The last few lines, right. Thank God the scorpion spare my children and bite me. Right. Sentiment, mother sentiment, is there. It was written, long back, right, 5 decades, 6 decades back. Are these sentiments, alive now? That is the valid question, that you must raise. How mothers are now. I told you, right, children are given snacks, there in small containers. And that containers, are many like, right, plastics, Tupperwares, vessels. Sometimes, directly from the shop, there in containers. Right. All those things, that we should keep in mind, learning that we are all getting into new cultural situations. So while discussing cultural studies and academics, usually the critical remarks made by Matthew Arnold in his book Culture and Anarchy. Very interesting book, that is. He attains, that a significance at a primary level. Right. He defines culture as the best which has been taught and said in the world. Right. So the best which has been taught and said in the world. Why? Right. Now, a small, a cute, granddaughter at home, not even 1 year old. So other day, we bought 2 sovereigns of gold, 4 shirts, right? 4 shirts, 2 studs, right? 3 pairs of shoes. Likewise, that it goes, right? The list, that goes. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year old. After that, after that. So that we offer, something as parents and grandparents, that we are doing, something. Children, right from, the age of, 3 or 4, they start learning through observation what's happening, around them. And they ask for it, why don't you buy this? Why don't you buy this? They become quickly, independent. They become quickly, individuals. Learn the hottest situation, around. They adapt. They adapt. There is no meaning, in finding fault, what happened to the past, with them. What happened to the tradition, there. No question of asking, such things. That is there. That is there. So Arnold, defines culture as the best which has been taught and said in the world. Yes. And he continues to say, right, culture then is a study of perfection. Perfection which consists in becoming something rather than in having something. See, very interesting, it is a study of perfection. How come, that is possible, right? Because every day, we change, right? Every minute, we change. That may not be, visible, to those who are very near. But those who are very far, right, suddenly, that they see, they understand, the changes. But those who are very close, they may not be able to understand, the changes, that quick. It will take, some time. The other day I watched you, in a different way. And today, you are different. So you are using, the term, different, frequently. So perfection, what he means, here is, he defines, a kind which consists in becoming something rather than in having something. So you are becoming, something. I'm just reminded of, Albert Camus' The Stranger, French and the Outsider, in English. He begins, narrating, the other day my mother passed away, right? So still, he retired, right? The idea of, mother passing away, the other day my mother passed away. So today, she is not with him. But she has left, so many things. She has given so many things. That's the idea, right? There is a meaning, that you are getting from that sign. The other day, my mother passed away. So, perfection which consists in becoming something rather than in having something. In an inward condition of the mind and spirit, not in an outward set of circumstances. In an inward condition of mind and spirit. So you are having, something and becoming, something. Are you ready for an, elephant ride now? But still, that you keep it, alive in your mind, when you were 3-year-old or 2-year-old parents, that they wanted to give you, an elephant ride, and you cried, and then you wept, and then you screamed, and you made everyone to look at you. But today, in a grown-up stage, that you feel shy and you don't want. You feel happy and you want to have a ride. See that? Difference, between individual and another individual. You are tempted to do it, right? And sometimes, that you want to ride, in an elephant statue. A real elephant, that you have fear. But in a statue, that you just climb and then give a pose to your camera Android camera, and you immediately, take that, photo through WhatsApp, Facebook, and you send, and you are actually awaiting for likings. How many followers? Your status, right? Symbol, is something, changed. So it is between, identity and a power. So that is, we are going to discuss. That was actually, Matthew Arnold. Now I'm taking, F.4 Lewis, whose article, Mass Civilization and Minority Culture. So culture has always been in minority keeping. So majority, that those days, right, F.4 Lewis stage. Even Marxists, that they changed, right? They had policy, right? So from F.4 Lewis, that we are getting into Max Hochmeier and Theodor Adorno, who observe culture in a capitalist society as culture today is infecting everything with sameness. So the writing is dialectic of enlightenment, philosophical fragments, right? These two are actually, Adorno and Hochmeier, they are called as, Frankfurt School of Thinkers. So the change is inevitable, right? When you are talking about, discussing about, sit, we should also accept, the change. Change is inevitable, right? So from Matthew Arnold, F.R. Lewis, and this Frankfurt School of Thinkers, you can understand culture is something, right? It is becoming, something. So rather than, in having something, right? So there is a center, the Birmingham University. It is Center of Contemporary Cultural Studies. See, that was, initiated, long back, right? In a Birmingham University, initiated a drastic shift in the way culture was conceived, in academic premises. There is also, an interesting fact, right? This is actually, arising from the social turmoil of the 1960s, right? Cultural studies, is an academic discipline which combines political economy, communication, sociology, social theory, literary theory, media theory, film studies, cultural anthropology, philosophy, art, history, criticism. And it just goes on, to study cultural phenomena in various societies. So before I get into that part, in various societies, let me take, the tribal situation, right? Even in the tribal situation, right, where oratory and oral culture, is strongly, followed. They don't have, written scripts. But has, there, the Western Ghat, all the tribals, that, plains, they do have, something very interesting, system. Right? So this study of cultural phenomena in various societies, right? Kaveri Nombison, has written, Scent of Pepper. Very interesting narrative. Where an ambition, concentrated. She is actually, a surgeon, a doctor. a medical practitioner turned writer. Ambition has actually, part of, the tribal situation, and she has raised to this surgeon situation. That is a different story, right? Personally. But she thought of, that including the atmosphere, tribal atmosphere there in the narrative, scent of pepper. The culture is, very well narrated and reflected, right? Where the social situation, is unchanged. There was no possibility of, shifting because they were very adamant. Adamant of, retaining, the original, the native. Does it actually signify, as uncultured, their way of life? No. They have, in mind and word, they had in mind and word a culture. Right? And they wanted to retain it. Very interesting, that novel, Scent of Pepper. So culture studies, researchers often focus on how a particular phenomenon relates matters of ideology, nationality, ethnicity, social class, and gender. At home, if there are two children, two belonging to two different gender, a baby boy is, given a car, a football, a cricket stump, like, and a baby girl, is offered a doll. Two different cultures, that are taught, at an young age, right? At an young age. And the identity, is marked. Identity is marked. A baby boy is given, a car, a football. See that, I'm talking about varieties, but in the case of a baby girl, right, a doll is given. Playing with the doll, is sufficient, right? To that world, right, they were given. But bit of change, today. Bit of change today, the perception of mothers living there in cosmopolitan situation. So matters of ideology, nationality, ethnicity, social class, and gender, all are, they. So these culture studies, have gained currency with the publication of Richard Hogarth's, Use of Literacy. That was in the year 1957. Raymond Williams' Culture and Society. And with the establishment of, CCS, Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies. That was in England in the year 1968. Now, culture is, considered as a source of art and literature. Cultural criticism has gained ground, and therefore Raymond Williams' term, cultural materialism, Stephen Greenwald's cultural physics, and Bakhtin's, term, cultural prosaic, have become significant in the field of cultural studies and cultural criticism. Okay. Now, you take any short story, any novel, right? Any novel. With the term, culture may not be available, direct to your eye contact. But your eye receives, your eye perceives, something, pursues something, and searches, a meaning. A meaning which you authenticate, administered, learned, understood, earlier. Suppose dance is your focus. You are taking, the thun is dance like a man. The term dance, there in the title, doesn't carry, any strong significance. But upon reading the character Jairaj, right, you understand, right? A baby girl was offered, I told, a doll. Why not a doll to a baby boy? Same time, why not, a car or football or cricket to a baby girl? No, you give it, and you observe, at a distance. As a mature person, you observe at a distance, how people belonging to different genders, handling, the same component, in the different ways. That's all. So, culture is, the source of art and literature. Criticism, gained ground. And people like Williams, Greenwald, and Bakhtin, that they have given, structured, methodologies, for you in the field of cultural studies and criticism. So, cultural studies is, interested in the process by which power relations, organize cultural artifacts. I told you something about food habits, music, cinema, sport events, So this actually, looks at popular culture and everyday life, which has hitherto been, dismissed as inferior and unworthy of academic study. But cultural studies approaches four basic, four strong components, right? Transcend the confines of a particular discipline such as literary criticism or history. So cultural studies is, transcend the confines of a particular discipline such as literary criticism or history. Now, history, that earlier, dealt the happenings, of the past. But nowadays, that you are viewing, you are interpreting, the historical text, right, where the authorial voice, dominates. To some, right, to some critics, believing in cultural studies, reading, a narrative. I am telling, a narrative. I'm not talking about, a historical source. I'm telling, a narrative on Shah Jahan, right? So, for example, the authorial voice, of Flora and Steele in The Builder. Builder is a fine novel, right? Published in the mid-19th century, right? 1850s and 60s, right? Flora and Steele. Written, a novel, The Builder, titled. So it is about Shah Jahan and Taj Mahal, right? You have another Indian author written Taj Mahal. T.N. Murari, has written, something. Timeri and Murari. A narrative again. A gap of nearly, 75, 80 years. So between Builder and Taj Mahal, right? The early version, by Flora and Steele, is purely a romance. And the later version, of T.N. Murari, is historical. And when you take, both these narratives, in the present day situation, right, cultural studies, is now in focus. You take it. Blames, both. Both are actually, biased, one concentrating only on the romance side and other one, telling Shah Jahan's, rule and building, the Taj Mahal, like. In both the cases, that the authorial voice, becomes, significant. As a result, that you develop something, a new study applying, new historicism, like. History is not, original. History is not, factual, because the writer is also, there, 10%, 20%, 30%, like. Recording, all those historical events, that is, even then, right, the style of the narrator, is coming. The prose style of the narrator is also coming, very strong there. So, cultural studies transcend the confines of a particular discipline as literal criticism or history. Cultural studies, are politically, engaged. Right. This is also very interesting, right? But politics, the power politics. So, I think, that I'll be coming to that bit late, bit late. And cultural studies, reject the distinction between, high and low art or elite and popular culture, right? What is this high and low art? What is this elite and popular? Are we engaging, the, academic values, or are we engaging, students and learners and scholars, right? To make a distinction, between high and low art. What is this high art and what is this low art? So cultural studies analyze not only the cultural works but also the means of production. Okay. So why, this Center for Cultural Studies, was formed, there in Binghamton University, right? So in order to understand, the changing political circumstances of class, politics and culture in the UK, United Kingdom, scholars, at this center, turn to work of Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, who modified the classical Marxism. When you take, when you take, cultural studies, very seriously, the idea of classic, is found missing, right? So that's what, Gramsci, is trying to tell. So Gramsci, modified classical Marxism in seeing culture as a key instrument of political and social control. In his view, capitalists are not only brute force, police, prison, military, to maintain control, but also penetrate the everyday culture of working people. See that? The change, there in classical Marxist thinking. And the cultural hegemony, is something, the key rubric for Gramsci. So culture is a key instrument of political and social control, right? That is very, very important. Gramsci's, thinking to modify it. So capitalists are not only, brute force to maintain control, but also penetrate the everyday culture of working people. So where you don't find, missing. Whereas Edgar and Sedgwick find out that theory of hegemony was pivotal to the development of British cultural studies. It facilitated analysis of the ways in which subaltern groups, actively resist and respond to political and economic domination. The focus, that you can take now is Stuart Hall's, definition of culture. He says culture is not so much, a set of things. Novels and paintings or TV programs and comics as a process. A set of practices. So Stuart Hall's interesting, right? It's argued culture is not, so much, a set of things, a set of practices. It is not, like novels, paintings or TV programs and comics as a process. It is a set of practices. Primarily, it is concerned with the production and exchange of meanings, the giving and taking of meaning. Between, the members of a society or group. Actually, this I have taken from representation, cultural representation and signifying practices. So right from, Matthew Arnold and to that, Gramsci and now, Stuart Hall, we are actually getting into, an understanding, that culture is a set of practices. It is actually a set of, it is actually, concerned with production and the exchange of meanings. It is giving and taking of meaning. On a closer reading of these definitions of culture by various critics and thinkers, we could find a gradual shift in the way, the concept of culture is, evolved. Right from, Arnold, to Stuart Hall, right? The important thing to understand is culture is no more associated with elitist premises. In other words, the academic scenario of cultural studies developed in relation to the working class people. So literally speaking, academics, came down from the mansion, to the streets. Hope you can understand, the situation, very clear. Those people who involve, in culture and adapting culture, and then they proceed and then they go ahead. But the field of academics, that we actually, the students and scholars and researchers and teachers, we have actually, taken, a serious role. So instead of actually staying aloof there, we are getting down, to the streets. And then, taking, the component, giving a look to it, giving a shape to it. Giving, new definition, to cultural studies. Now the classrooms, that maybe in another 5 minutes, that I take. So cultural studies, is taught as a part of English curriculum in universities. The methodologies behind both are, very different. The major observation regarding, the application of cultural studies in literature classrooms is that students' intentionality or unintentionality or practicing cultural readings of literary texts without understanding the underlying methodology. One, that is. They conduct, students as well as, the faculties, conduct a feminist reading, a post-colonial reading of some literary texts. In that case, they are seldom aware that such readings, which are interdisciplinary in nature, come under the broad area of cultural studies. I told you, that Sasi Deshpande, dealt or researched, right, the writings of Sasi Deshpande, Anita Desai, any writer, Arundhati Roy, any writer, any Indian writer, any British, any Afro-American or African writer, you apply, that a theoretical base on those works and those works of, writers. So are all coming under the broad area of, cultural studies. In a literary reading of a text, the methodology would be more inclined towards the form, narrative patterns, grammar, rhyme scheme, in the case of, a poem. Even there, the grammar, can be understood in a poem, right? The narrative patterns, especially with fiction and short fiction. So in a cultural reading of any text, which includes literary genres like novels, stories, poetry, and other texts like movies, songs. I told you, interesting research, 6 songs, popular songs, English songs, right? Advertisements, fashion. The emphasis would be on the power structure and discourses involved in the narration. This is always, there, right? This is always there. So in other words, the cultural elements in any text are critically examined and the nuances of the cultural specificity is dismantled and analyzed. You break it, you understand, right? Why, the story is, given the title, Cloths, right? Chitra Vanajidivagara, short story, that I told you in the early part of my lecture. The girl, becoming wife of an American-based youngster, from a half sari to a different attire, right? It includes, so many things, right? Change of attire, speaking the culture of a girl. The case, that when you simply view that, as a story, what you understand is from half sari to sleeveless, right? What happened, in between? Of course, there in the story, that she lost her husband also, becoming, an entrepreneur. That is also very interesting, right? A village girl, turned into an entrepreneur, that story. So you call out, the meaning, so many meaning. It comes to you when you read, the story, 10 or 15 pages, story. So you dismantle and then you analyze, right? In order to understand cultural specificity. In traditional English classrooms, students are trained in such a fashion that they misunderstand the cultural reading or literary reading. Traditional classrooms. So there must be a fundamental change in the way students and faculties of literature should approach cultural studies. Though interdisciplinary in nature, the academics, have designed, a structured methodology for cultural studies. Now, it is generally considered as an independent discipline which could influence several other disciplines. So you are watching, a movie, any movie, right? Need not worry about, the language content. Where a culture is, visible to your eyes, right? What type of culture, displayed there. Any movie, right? Any movie in any language. You observe, right? Performance of, characters. I told you that need not worry about, the exchanges, communication. But the way, that they lead, the roles, you can understand, something that is culture. Just like Magesh Dattan is on a muggy night in Mumbai, where the stage, is set there in the apartment, third floor of the apartment, where like-minded people are invited. Do not worry about, the dialogues, right? You can understand, the behavior of all characters, there. You can understand what is actually the focus of Magesh Dattani. 100%, that is a new culture he is going to introduce, there. A new culture, that means, a new type of relationship, which is not, possible, which is not, visible, which is not, practiced, right? Which is not practiced. Suddenly, that he introduced, right? That was, 1.5 decades, back. About 1.5 decades back. And that was introduced, how people reacted. But now, do we have the same reaction? That question, comes. Right. That's it, right? Though we may not be able to, not everyone, is in a practicing mood. But some, right? Some. They felt unhappy that they weren't, given rooms, spaces. But now, the gender, is coming. The type of life, style is, accepted, at least in cosmopolitan situations in India. The West, that is no question. But in the East, the question, is still, there. But question is answered, right? And the answer is not, taken in the right sense. Yes, we are the people. Within double quotes, people within double quotes. And that is actually, the space for real research, right? So with this, gentlemen, ladies, I'm much pleased, right? And I thank Professor Muruganyanam and his team, for giving a nice opportunity of, sharing my views on culture studies. And in today's academics, there is a possibility, right? There is a possibility of learning more about, the culture, right? Learning more about the culture and the practices, that we are having, right? Of course, the structured methodologies, framed by Arnold to Stuart Hall, and in between you have Ramsey and Williams. Those people are there, to support, to apply, a strategy to learn, understand, and make our reflection, to the younger generation or the future researchers in Indian colleges and universities. Thank you so much, and namaskar to everyone. And if you have any doubts, queries, and if I have an answer, for your queries and doubts, I am open. And I think, that I'll be able to explain to your expectation. So thank you. I thank, the principal also, right at this moment. Maybe, he's not found here, but I think, that he'll be informed, about this. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir. So participants, if you have any questions, you can put
Yes.
them forward. You can ask the questions or else you can post it in the chat box.
Chat box.
Do we have any questions?
So this is not actually, this is not new, and actually it is now 7 or 8 year old, in Indian universities and colleges, and even I told you that film studies, is part of the syllabus, wherein Satyajit Ray is dealt, and our own Tamil classic movies, are dealt, and again, I told you, that popular culture, is introduced. James Hawley Chase and Sydney Sultan, weren't, taken for research, but in present day situation, that everything, is possible, right? We view, and even one interesting uh, research, is female genital mutilation, that is also practiced in India, right? So at one stage, that we are talking about pandemic situation and this COVID situation. At the other side, that things are happening, in invisible circumstances. Now that are all brought to stage, right? I mean, we should acknowledge, here, and register here. The universities and authorities, are permitting nowadays, for a study on FGM, right? Female genital mutilation. And trauma theories, that are applied, and children are working on, serious topics, on trauma studies, right? That is also, possible, right? That is seriously, going on. So one way of, that the change is, that the thematic analysis that is found missing, now. So we are not actually, seriously, taking research on thematic analysis. So our present day research, is something, focused on popular fiction and pandemic situation and trauma situation, and even, the politics and power related studies.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from our first MA student. So Pratibha is asking if you could explain on the idea of cultural appropriation in popular culture texts or digital literature.
So that is very interesting, right? Now we cannot actually, fix, a simple component, to study, a text. Just like, the widening of our knowledge, widening of our studies, I mean, based on, the present day requirements, right? So for example, one interesting change, now happening in the syllabus is, literature of the pandemic. So this is going on now and current, and that study, is taken for research, and how long, that it stays, that becomes, a question. You cannot, appropriately, that concretize or fix it, permanently, right? So earlier, it was translation studies. Now it is, you have, European classics in translation, and regional literatures in translation, or regional literature in translation, right? The scope, is widening, and it is coming close to you also. Now, the idea of, appropriating, a particular one, is not feasible, in the present situation. Maybe, that we'll have to, sustain it, for a while, to get, concrete knowledge. That is possible. That is my view, and hope I answered your question.
Pratibha, hope that was clear. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
My audio is not, audible. Yes.
So excuse us, sir. We have some network issues from our end.
Okay. No problem.
Okay, so if we don't have any questions, let's move on to the last part of the session. Let me invite Dr. Nagaratika to deliver her vote of thanks.
Good afternoon. Hope you all enjoyed the talk today. I'm Dr. Nagaradhika, Faculty, Department of MA English, DG Vaishnav College. And it's an absolute honor to be asked to propose the vote of thanks today. First, we would like to thank the Secretary of the College, Shri Ashok Kumar Mundra, and Captain Santosh Babu, our Principal, without whose help the program would not have been possible. Now, coming to the most important person of this webinar, we want to put on our record our deep sense of appreciation for Dr. Bhaskaran for giving us a survey of culture studies. Right from giving the listeners an understanding of culture studies and its relationship with other fields of academics, to helping us understand the definition of culture as being a negotiation of meaning through practices by the members of a community. All this helped to sensitize us to the fact that culture is not prediscursive, which allows us to explore it for study and bring it into discussion. Thank you also for unveiling the nexus between culture and power, as first explicated by Gramsci, and also further why academics have now descended from their ivory towers of study to get their hands dirty. Now, once again, sir, thank you for the opportunity for allowing us to listen to you. We would like to thank our audience today, who have been very cooperative and who have kept us motivated through the session. We are grateful to our colleagues, Ms. Priyanka and Ms. Lakshmi, who have helped us make this program the success it was today, of course, under the able tutelage of our head, Dr. Muraliganam. Finally, our gratitude is due to our lovely students, because without them, we would not be motivated to do our best. Thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you so much. And, namaskar to all of you. Thank you, Murali Anna, for making me available at DG Vaishnava College. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. See you again.